I miss the old days when video game covers had an artistic quality that often had nothing to do with the game itself, at least not directly. The cover art for The Guardian Legend is one of those that you can't stop staring at. Those eyes, that forehead face, the barren landscape, it's cool. Even the Famicom cover is wild and may even be better. It looks like H.R. Geiger tried to draw a patella from memory, gave up, and slapped a woman on it. I didn't play this one growing up, though I wish I had. It's a perfect blend of top-down action-adventure with shmup levels that aren't too tough, all rolled into one genre hybrid, kinda like Blaster Master. For some reason, until a few years ago, I thought this game was based on a movie. I blame the North American cover art for that, and it's not because that cover itself was ripped off from a 1985 science fiction horror film called Creature, because I wasn't aware of that movie and still haven't watched it, but the art just looks movie poster-esque in a way I'm not equipped to describe. Am I alone on that? Anyway, let's take a look at The Guardian Legend and see what's up.
The action was blazing in Zelda. The adventure was a blast with Link. Now experience Guardian Legend. Guardian Legend, the most action-packed adventure of all time. Killer crabs, mutant lobsters, secret passages, spectacular transformations, shooting cyclops, deadly jaws, exploding anemones, devious traps, unlimited firepower, a large choice of weapons, and more action than you ever thought possible. Guardian Legend for your Nintendo Entertainment System.
In The Guardian Legend, you swap between vertically scrolling space shooter sections and top-down adventure sections. The game actually starts you as the flying spaceship, and after you defeat the first boss, you end up on Naju, a huge world that an alien race has hurled toward Earth that you, the Guardian, are tasked with exploring and ultimately vanquishing. Naju is a labyrinth of corridors where secret doors lay hidden beneath tiles you can destroy, but there's an order to this gated exploration adventure. The doors require specific keys that you'll need to explore to find. Those keys are denoted by particular icons. The first one you encounter is of a crescent moon shape, so you'll need to locate that key in order to unlock all the doors in the game with that icon. It's in this way that the game encourages you to explore. When you hit a roadblock, it's time to backtrack and look for clues. Clues often come in the form of cryptic messages that tell you how to access each new corridor. It's a little convoluted, but you can consider the first location you explored to be Naju's hub world, and it's from there where you'll need to find and access each new branch of corridors. Clues to access the corridors end up being things like, hey, just shoot it, or wait a few seconds for it to open. Each one with a different gimmick, but ultimately not too hard to figure out. The top-down sections feel pretty good to play and will feel familiar if you enjoy games like the original Legend of Zelda. The map is laid out in tiles, and each new screen introduces new enemies. You may encounter mini-bosses that seal off your exits, requiring you to defeat the enemy to move on, but often results in a nice power-up. For the rest of the enemies, you can choose to deal with them or run past them, up to you. There is a nice variety of weapons here that you can obtain from killing the bosses. Each are limited in their use, but ammo pops up fairly regularly, so that's not typically a worry. And at some point, you'll have enough secondary weapons that you can a la carte your way through a level, trying each one's effectiveness on new enemies. The secondary attacks include ranged attacks, grenades, bullet shields, and even a lightsaber, and a dual lightsaber. Experimenting with the different attacks is one of the funner parts of the game, and bosses can be made easier if you choose the right attack for their pattern. These weapons even transfer to the flying stages as well. There are plenty of power-ups to collect to keep your health full and your power up. Health is a real commodity in later levels where some screens become a war of attrition. Generally, the game isn't very difficult if you make good use of your secondary weapons, but requires some trial and error to get the hang of. The most challenging aspect in the gated exploration stages will be to survive long enough to figure out where to go next. Thankfully, the game has infinite continues and a password system, so there's no lost effort here. One major bummer is that the passwords use some overly complicated wingding chaos font. Back in the day, you would have to scrawl this down on a piece of paper and hope your parents didn't think you were writing a love letter to Satan. But nowadays, you'll want to take a pic with your phone to ensure there's no mistaking the rune language for when you want to play again. In a manual I found online, some poor kid tried to write down one of these forsaken things and crossed one out, presumably due to a transcription error. I hope they made it beyond Area 1, though, eventually. Poor kid. To get a password, you have to find a specific character in the game who is tucked away somewhere in each level. These same characters also sell you upgrades for your weapons too, so seeking them out is important anyway. So far, we've covered most of the ground-based elements of the game. Run around, explore, find keys and clues, kill everything, or most everything, up to you, and find the flying stages. Once you access these stages, you'll transform into a spaceship and fly up the screen at a pretty solid speed. These sections aren't too tough in the early levels, but as you go, the bosses start stacking and the game becomes more grueling. Thankfully, if you die, you'll just start the section over again. The bosses are wily at times, flooding the screen with projectiles and moving in indiscernible patterns. The difficulty ramps up considerably at some point, but this is where your secondary weapons and experimenting with those comes in handy. This is a long game. In total, you need to progress through 10 levels, each one including multiple labyrinths and flying sections in order to complete. The passwords, while annoying, are necessary. Good news, you'll be accompanied throughout your playthrough by a pretty good soundtrack, and while the game does get hard, it's never really unfair. The weapon system and secondary attacks add a needed layer to combat that keeps it varied, exploring is fun and rewarding, and the flying sections aren't terribly punishing. The Guardian Legend is a sequel to a 1986 MSX game called Gardic that was a single-screen at-a-time shooter, which kind of makes it stand out a little. The sequel, the game we cover today, only released on the NES, and to mixed reviews at that, which surprises me. This is a solid game, with plenty to offer in terms of variety and depth. It never quite reached household name status, and that's a shame. I think the cover and maybe some lousy marketing can be attributed to that, but in my opinion, the Guardian Legend deserves to be near the top of your NES best of lists. Well, that's going to do it for the Guardian Legend on the NES, and as always, write a letter to Satan sometimes. And thanks for watching.